All right. Hello, young entrepreneurs of the Yay community and from around the world. Welcome to Ask a Coach Hour. My name's Claire Sterngold, and I'm the Yay community manager here in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And today we have Michelle Beynon. She's located in Tampa, Florida, in the United States, and she's a vice president at Citigroup. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Claire. Thanks a lot for the intro. Just a little bit about me, folks. So this is the first time I've done this, so be kind. We'll take it from there. I work at Citi as a vice president in what we call the Organizational Project Management Office. So basically, it's the OPMO by acronyms. So if you're in industry, you know that acronyms are a way of the world. I came up through the ranks of, I started out in the programming, computer programming, which is not really my love of my life or anything like that, but quickly found that systems analysis and project management were a space that I preferred. So I really have stayed in that segment of the industry for quite some time. For many, many years, I was involved in what we call the execution process, which basically works with business and technical managers to be able to execute change through an organization. So after a while for execution, I did that for a couple of decades, I decided I wanted to transition. So right now, the role that I'm in allows me to use a lot of the experience that I have had in my career, and basically work in a position of oversight and governance and training. So that's the role that I have right now. I have in my past had some experience in being a business owner, and my husband and I had a partnership which has its goods and its bad points to it, but we did work for a while as a consultancy, so I'm hoping to be able to answer some questions with regard to budgeting and finance for those of you who are thinking of starting a new business or are in the early phases of a business opportunity.
Awesome. So thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. It seems like you've had quite an extensive career and you've worked in many different roles. So I'm sure you have a lot of experiences and anecdotes to share with the community. As you guys know, you can post your questions in the comments section on Facebook to Michelle, and I'll be able to ask them for you here in the studio. And we have some questions that the community have already put forward. But maybe, Michelle, before we dive into the questions, you could just give kind of a little bit of oversight for everyone who's watching on budgeting and finance for small businesses. So maybe some key tips or some strategies that you've learned over the course of your career. Maybe you can even dive into some mistakes that you've seen others make. So you can get some background and give people something to work with.
Well, a lot of times people have a good idea and they want to think about branching it out into a business. One of the things that's required for most businesses is some kind of startup funding. So whether it comes from money that you've saved, money that you borrow, there is usually some cost associated with the startup of a business. Okay, let's just start with the basics. So what's the purpose of a budget? Think of a budget as just a basic tracker for what you would do with money. So if you keep one for your own personal finance, which many people do, some people have a high level, projection of what they have coming in and what they're going out so that they know where their money stands. It's always a good idea to do that personally so that you have an idea of if you have enough or you're making enough money to be able to support your expenses, and if not, what kind of concessions do you have to do to make sure that you're meeting your needs? Things might have to be adjusted with regards to how much you spend, or maybe how much you earn. Maybe there's a way to get more money in. So if you look at that from a business perspective, it's really no different. So when you propose the idea of a business to yourself or to investors or to people who you might want to work with, you have to think about how much money do I anticipate earning versus how much money do I anticipate spending. Generally speaking, if you're in startup mode, it's not really guaranteed that you're going to have an income coming in on day one. Some people are lucky, but sometimes it does make a difference. It takes a little while for income to start to flow in. So there is a difference between income and profit. So income is what comes into your business, and profit is what you have after you have all of your expenses and costs subtracted from that. So it's a good thing to just recognize that there's different terminology, and it's really important to know what they are. I would say that from a planning purpose, a budget is a good idea to have. So like I said, if you're in startup mode and you have to have a rent, utilities, maybe a reception space who help you out. If you're in a manufacturing space, you might have to consider the cost of your inventory and the cost of actual production. If you're in the service sector, sometimes a little bit of difference is that if it's your time, if it's your service that is your business, you might not necessarily say, I'm not going to pay myself for a while. And then, so that kind of offsets the income that comes in. So I would say that, what it does to help you as a business owner is that it gives you a plan and a path forward. And this is a good thing to have. I know somebody who recently left the corporate world and decided that they were going to be a travel agent. This is my brother. He's a great guy. And he actually budgeted for 18 months because he knew that as a travel agent, if he booked somebody on let's say a cruise today, but they didn't take it for 6 months, he doesn't get paid for 6 months until the actual event occurs. So he actually budgeted, and I was really happy to see that he did this, about an 18-month span. So he sat down and said, okay, I'm going to do this as a sole prop. I need to know how much money I need to pay for my mortgage, my utilities, and all that kind of stuff. And since he's working out of his home, he doesn't have the expenses associated with having a rent situation. But he knew that he's not going to get paid for a while. So he needed to have what we call a buffer to make sure that he had the funds to sustain himself for that period of time. So I think that that's the first consideration that you have to have is, how do you sustain yourself and also build this business? So, if you live at home with mom and dad, or if you have a spouse, that is going to say, I'm going to support you and feed you while you're starting this business, this is a great thing to do. If not, and you're an individual whose support is as an individual, you need to make sure that you have enough money to be able to sustain yourself while you're doing that. That is one of the biggest risks that independent business owners have, is that they haven't set up enough of a buffer to get them through the first 6, 8, 10 months or a year even while a business is launching.
Definitely. And actually, I think that's really important because that's, in a sense, a big part of a budget is to actually look into the future and to think about what your costs will be, not in the current moment, but in the future. And that actually is funny because we have a question from Solomon Japong, who's located in Ghana. And I think it ties in quite well to what you just said. And basically his question is about, is it good as a startup owner to estimate above what you think your costs will be? So, to give yourself a little bit of buffer in thinking, these are my costs, but maybe I should overestimate what they will be now and in the future so I can have a little bit of buffer room. Maybe you can speak whether that's a good strategy or not.
That's a great question, Salon. I would say that it probably some kind of a, what do I want to call it? Cushion would be a good idea to have, because you really don't know. I mean, you can estimate that, let's say, for instance, that your electric bill is going to be, $50 a month, but you don't have any control over fluctuations in the industry's rates and things like that. So I would say that, you definitely have some kind of a buffer to be able to, to be able to anticipate unexpected costs. You don't know. I mean, in the U.S., people who had their postage this week, I think we're actually having a postage change. So if you're doing marketing that needs postage or things like that, then you have to be able to anticipate that there's going to be increases for for costs. Very rarely do they go down. So I would say that it doesn't happen often, right? I would say that having a buffer there, and also too, you just don't know if things are going to break or need to be repaired. If you haven't built that in, then it's a good idea to have that little bit of a cushion to address that. Like for instance, I can't stand this microphone in here, but which I need a new one, so I'm going to have to budget for that. I hope that answered your question.
No, I think that's good. And I think Solomon has another question, but maybe we'll take one from our preset list and come back to that one. Because I also think this is important for thinking about the future, and that a budget is not kind of a one-time thing that you do.
Right.
So one of the entrepreneurs had asked, should you create a new budget at the beginning of every year, or when is it good to create a new budget?
The beginning of every year is a good idea, and that can be calendar or fiscal. Excuse me. I warned Claire that happens after I talk a little bit. My throat gets a little bit scratchy. So I would say at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning, or when any new event happens. So for instance, if you have to move, I would recast my budget. If you're going to bring on a new employee, I would recast the budget. If your insurance offerings, let's say you're going to start to offer employee benefits to folks where you hadn't offered it in the past. I would look at revisit the budget. So I would say that at the beginning of every year minimally, and then also with any major change event.
Okay, perfect. So I think for everyone watching, that's some really good advice. I know people like to think that, you've done your budget, you've thought about it, you can kind of set it aside, but it's something you should be continuously looking at throughout the year.
Yeah, I call it a living and breathing planning session. So think about this is an analogy I like to use all of the time. Think about an airline pilot. So, we as passengers think that the airline is going straight. The airplane is going straight. Well, we use the concept of constant course correction. So every time there's a little bit of a jog in how that airline pilot is steering the plane, they do a constant course correction to keep you on the line to get to your goal. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the way you should look at a budget, is constant course correction. Is that, you might find that you're spending more in one area and less than another. So you might want to reallocate those funds and use them for something that's more aligned with your investment than have it as a cost feature.
Definitely. Okay, that's excellent. And I think that's a great analogy that you've used to explain it. Your business is constantly changing. The ecosystem in which your business operates is constantly in flux. So your way that you interact with your business and with the ecosystem should adjust accordingly. So I think that's really important. So we have some good questions coming in. We have another one from Aisha Ali. She's located in Uganda. And this actually ties into another we had on our set. She asked, at what stage is it advisable for a business to take out a loan? So maybe we can discuss a little bit about, how loans work. As you're an expert, you work at Citi, and then when a small business should look into taking out loans.
Hi, Isha. That's a great question. So I would say that before you engage in the opportunity to take out a loan, really assess what it's going to be used for. Because there is the concept of bad debt and good debt. So let's talk about good debt. Good debt is something that is going to help you get forward. So it might just be one of those things where, you need to invest in some more infrastructure in order for you to have the growth that you want to have in your company. So that I would say that would be the type of a good reason to engage in taking a loan. The bad debt would be, if you're just going to borrow money for the sake of borrowing money. I would also strongly suggest that you look at the interest rate, which is associated with the debt, and the terms of the loan. If you're going to borrow from a bank or something like that, it's pretty well laid out what the interest rate will be and what your terms of your loan are going to be. If you're going to invest with or take a loan from an investor, or someone in your family, I would be very, very careful and very cautious with how you go about defining the terms of the loan, because that really helps to define whether or not you're putting yourself in a good situation for growth, or you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be indebted and indentured to someone. If you're involved with an investor, and all they're looking for is the financial investor with investment with no say, that could be something to look at. If you're looking for an investor and they want to have a stake in your company, that is certainly something to make sure you have consideration for, because anything that you do where you give up stake or share means that you have less say in the ownership of your own organization. So if that's important to you, then make sure that you absolutely look at the types of loans that you take and the terms of those loans, to ensure that you're getting the funds that you need at the right impact to your company.
Definitely. I think that's really crucial. And something also to note is that, Michelle, you are located in the United States, and obviously the way that the banking system operates in the United States is going to be different from, say, Uganda, from, say, Ghana, that every country has its different system. And so It might also be really important to say that you should do your research. Maybe I think another way that we can go from this question is to give a little bit of insight on those topics that you discussed, good debt and bad debt. Can you provide a bit of insight into what is good debt versus bad debt?
Yeah, I think that, good debt is anything that might help you propel yourself forward. So good debt taken for maybe a new building because you've outgrown the building that you're in right now. Or let's say, for instance, that you're working out of, a spare bedroom in somebody's house, and you realize that you really do need a space where there's foot traffic or there's more traffic. So you might want to take a loan to be able to get into a lease or a purchase for a property. Those types of things are considered good debt. Bad debt, I would say, is anything that is beyond the scope of need. So if you just want the latest and greatest phone, or the latest and greatest piece of software, or whatever the case may be, really watch what you do there. If you cannot justify, hopefully everybody has heard the term ROI, or return on investment. If you could not justify that, then I would assume that to be a bad debt. If you're not going to have a growth feature associated with the loaning or the borrowing of money, then I would say rethink that. If there's a better way to do it, then do that.
Okay, that's really important. And I think that's a great insight, and good to distinguish what is good debt and what is bad debt. Because I think sometimes the term debt can be scary in general, but really important to note that there is actually good debt, and it can help.
Yeah. Yeah. For instance, let's just take the scenario of education. For many students, having a loan to go to school is a reality. However, if you can get the same type of, let's just say, education and credentials at a local or state college, at least in the U.S., there's that structure here, and you have that, and you can, maybe only borrow between $25,000 and $30,000 for your education, and you want to be a teacher, that might be justifiable as a good debt. However, if you want to go to a high-end private school where you would come out with a loan of, $100,000 or $120,000 a year, which is this, an insurmountable amount of money at a certain point in life, to have the same kind of credential, then especially for let's say lower. My cat's going to join us in a minute. Yeah, he's upset that I'm speaking on the phone and not to him. I would say that might be assumed as a bad debt if you have like $120,000 debt for an occupation that might cap out at a lower framework for income.
Excuse me. Great.
You get that.
No problem.
Oh, yeah, there he is. There's my boy. Okay.
So we have more than just humans joining this Ask a Coach Hour.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, well, that's a great response. So thank you for that, and I hope everyone's gotten a bit more clarity now on budgeting good debt and bad debt, and when you should take out a loan. So we had a question from Barbara and Juliet, both also from Uganda, and they were asking about budgeting strategies. So tips or methods for small business where they can, basically make budgeting easy. Maybe there's some kind of tool that you use or that you advise your clients to use. And another sub question they had there was, is there a specific budgeting model which is best for small businesses?
Yeah, I would say I don't really have a model in place, but what I do is I work with some of the high school students locally on a program called Junior Achievement and work with them for personal finance. So what I do with those folks is I tell them the same thing I would say for a small business. First of all, start just to log and jot down anything that you might find that you spend money on with regards to your business, because there's a lot of hidden costs that people don't realize. And I would say never use the word just in front. It's just $20. It's just $40. That's after a while, if you do that monthly, that all adds up. So you take that 20, you take that 40, you have 60 times 12. They do the math. That's a $700-800 budget line item for your small business. So I would say just to do that, just to keep track of anything that you might have in terms of expenses. And then also keep track of any other ways to make money. You might find that, maybe you're selling a product. Somebody asks you for something to be customized. You'd never even thought about that. And whammo, you have another income stream coming in. So I would say that would be the first thing. Get yourself a copy of a good spreadsheet, software, whether it's a formal accounting system, or if you're just going to use it on an Excel, there's all kinds of templates out there that you can use, and just find the one that works best for your business.
Perfect. And I think that's also good to talk about, that there are all these options now when it comes to accounting software, and they're not expensive. Many of them have great online tutorials that can show you how to use it. And, if it does come at a cost, I think it's a good upfront cost to invest in to ensure your budget is managed down the line. So, maybe this is a good debt we can talk about.
One other thing to check is also, in the US, look for your small business incubators at many of the local colleges and universities in the US, and I'm not sure if this applies to global. They do have a lot of their graduate students who are looking to, project work, basically. So what they'll do is they'll work with small businesses and actually help you set up things like your budgets, your basic accounting needs are addressed. They'll show you what to populate your income statements with and all of that. So they'll show you how to work through that and balance it. In the US also, there's a group called SCORE, which is, I'm sorry, I forget what it stands for, but basically what it is retired executives who basically will work with businesses and startups, and they bring all of the information that they have from their own experiences, and usually it's high-end corporate, to be able to give you information for what you should look for and what you should do with starting your business. So I would say that those are the types of things that you should look at. The internet is rich with information for what to do and budgets that might work for your specific business or industry type.
Definitely. And that it's definitely true in even Ghana or Uganda that, all the business schools, they have clubs, they have resources, they have the professors, they have accounting associations, banking associations. So it might be good to think, don't be afraid to reach out to these guys and to have them, work as a volunteer or to reach out to them as a mentor. People love to support, inspirational youth entrepreneurs. So don't be afraid to leverage the resources in your environment.
Absolutely.
Great, great. So we'll go on to the next question. We have one from Paul Mbua, and he asked, which is a bit the topic, but we'll go ahead and address it. He says, how do you build an investment company when you are kicking out a career in investment management? I'm not sure that
I couldn't tell you how to do that. Honestly, I've been in the service sector providing basically what, when I was I had my own businesses, I supplied systems analysis and project management support for businesses. That is totally out of my framework. So I'm sorry, I can't help you with that one.
But Paul, might be good to say that there are other coaches on the Yay Community platform who are consultants, who are investors. So you can also reach out to one of them, and potentially, we can help connect you with the right person on the Yay Community platform. But just wanted to address that one. So if
no problem.
Out. All right. So next question I have is from an entrepreneur, anonymous, that says, I am looking to scale up my enterprise and invest in employing more people. To do this, I will need to take out a loan. If I am looking for a $5,000 investment, should I get a loan or should I look at a different option? So it's more, this question is not so much about the type of loan, but about the size that they're looking for and whether that's what a bank would be able to provide.
Yeah, that might be a little on the low side. You might be able to get that kind of funding from a local bank. It's called a payroll loan. Basically, what you would do is you would go in and you would say, this is my situation. I have to cover payroll for X number of period of time. I expect to have, accounts receivable coming in to be able to adjust that. And basically what you do is you have a short-term loan that covers you for the period of time to be able to pay your employees. And then you're constantly paying the bank back, and then they're giving you a loan again. So what happens is that, they're looking at, let's say you're looking at your $5,000 loan from the bank to cover you for the month of January. By the middle of February, you've already paid that bank back, and perhaps you have get the loan once again for that money. So you're in this constant rolling thing. The hope is that at any given point that your account receivables and your income and profit is enough for you to then handle your payroll on your own and to be able to get out of the cycle of taking that short-term loan for the purpose of paying and employing people. I'm not sure about the minimum amounts. I know that there are banks that do investments for small businesses. You would probably have to hunt around and find one that would be willing to engage in a $5,000 model. Usually I think they go a little bit more, but I'm sure that there's somebody out there to help you. I don't know offhand who that might be.
And this is also tying in, to do your research, get your hands a bit dirty, because every country is different and every bank will offer loans at different terms and at different levels. So it really is worth your time to look into how your ecosystem, how your banking structure works in your company. And also, as we mentioned before, not to be afraid of getting in touch with experts in your ecosystem who can help you and provide guidance.
There are banks that engage in microfinancing for businesses. And I know that's, I shared with Claire that I teach some classes adjunct. One of the classes that I teach is, Introduction to Business. And we do a segment on microfinancing and, how the fact that $50, $100, $200 in some nations would be a great startup amount for somebody to start a home-based business. Let's say if there's a group of women who want to make clothes and all they really do is need the investment for is a sewing machine. That's considered microfinancing to get these folks started. So I would look into those kinds of situations and see if there's anybody in your respective country who offers that type of investment to get started.
Great. Thank you. So we have another question from Desmond Egbe. Desmond is actually the Yay ambassador from Cameroon. And he has asked, how can effective financial management help you to scale a small business?
Okay, sure. So hi, Desmond, that's a great question. So with regarding to scale, usually people think of going larger. So let's just take it from that perspective. If you have, in fact, used your finances well, and your intention is to grow, then I would say that it's crucial to have a good financial plan in place. Most companies don't, without a plan, go smaller. Sometimes this happens, but it's usually with the decision to get out of a certain sector or whatever the case may be. So if you stay in the concept of growth mode, making sure that you have enough to do that is critical. I just heard something on NPR the other day about these huge, I guess we would call them telecom and entertainment companies that have engaged in purchasing other competitors, basically. And the price tags are just mind-boggling. $15 billion to buy, a competitor or whatever the case may be. So those folks are engaging in huge amounts of money to be able to, grow. If you want to scale to that, scale it all, you just need to make sure that you have a strong foundation financially to be able to support the weight. Because think of it that way, the weight of having more debt, more payroll, more infrastructure that you have to support. If you have indications within your financial plan that you are in growth trend and that you have enough more money to support, scaling upwards, then by all means do that. And that can come in many, many ways. So if you're thinking, like, let's say, for instance, you have a service and you're thinking about adding more people, that's usually done through payroll. If you're thinking about, you have a good business model and you might want to say, I want to have another store in the next town. Well, there's a couple of ways to do that. One would be that you just own it and then you split yourself between the stores and you get resources to manage the stores. The other could be, think about like the opportunities to come up with a franchise model, for instance, that will basically you set up the framework, you set up the support, you might market for your industry or your businesses, and other people share in that. They pay you residual fees, so you have an income stream from that way. And then they also have a vested interest by investing into the ownership of that particular site. But you can't do that if you don't know where you are financially. Having that financial oversight and that understanding of where you stand fiscally is absolutely crucial for making the decision to scale.
Perfect. All right. I think that is a great answer, Desmond. I hope that you feel like you got a good answer. And actually, Wilson, he is our ambassador for Ghana, has asked a similar question. So I think Wilson, Michelle has just answered when you should also look into scaling up. So if I'm correct, it has to do with, the weight that your business is able to take on. And if you're able to take on that burden of more expenses.
Yeah. And also think of it from this space. We all have what we call span of control. So if you've ever gone to business school, you understand span of control. And basically that's the number of people that you can have coming to you or reporting to you where you still maintain a semblance of order in the interactions that you have with them. Once you get beyond that span of control, you have to begin to delegate. Some people are very good delegators and some people are not. If you're not comfortable with that, if you're not comfortable with basically delegating, which is a little bit of a loss of power and control, then you might be better off staying a small individual owner and not scaling. And that's perfectly okay. Just for a second, I had an old dentist and he was so funny. He was an old dentist and my old dentist. So he gave me a little bit. I said, why do you work by yourself? He said, I had a big company. He said, I had, 15 dentists, 15 chairs under me and a couple of hygienists and a couple of people who worked the office. He said, at the end of the day, I was exhausted because I was a business person and I really just wanted to be a dentist. So he said, as he started to get a little older, he scaled back and he said to folks who wanted to do their own thing, you do your own thing. I'm going to go back to be a single operator. At the end of the day, he determined doing his finances that he made the same amount of money being a single operator as he did being the owner of a large business with all of the implications that went with that. So that's something to think about, how you want to spend your time, whether you want to do your craft or whether you want to engage in the running of a business.
Definitely, definitely. I think that's a really important distinction to make. And also, it's really important to think about, your priorities as well and what type of leader you are. I think
Right.
What you mentioned there is, whether you personally also want to take on that advanced leadership role and managing more people. And if you find that you're not ready within yourself, then maybe it's not the moment to scale
Right.
up. Besides finance.
And we use finance. We use the word management, but there is a component of, I don't mean to sound snippy when I say this, there is a component of babysitting. So, when you get involved with managing other people, you get into personalities, you get into what their wishes and dreams are, their particular work habits and how they are, how they engage, whether they have good work practices or don't have good work practices. So when you think about it from that perspective, think about how much time and energy and emotional energy that you want to spend in that space.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Very important to think about. And this is a bit of your expertise as well. You're specialized in this. So Michelle knows. So we have another question from Solomon, and it has to do with when is it appropriate to start paying back an investment after you've started up? Maybe you can shed a little bit of light on this. I think if you're speaking of an investment with an investor, usually the terms of the repayment have been decided on in advance. But maybe you can provide some clarity.
I would say that absolutely the terms are going to be your driver. Some investors might say, I don't need to see anything for a year or 6 months, or some investors will say, I need to start seeing cash flow within a month. So they might have a terms with you which are 30 days. So it just really depends upon the terms. It's their level of comfort. Some people will say, I've heard of people said, I'm just going to be a silent investor. I don't want to have any involvement. In 5 years, I want my money back, and I want to make, whatever interest rate it was that I had determined that I was going to submit to you. So, that would be a case where, if you borrowed somebody borrowed $10,000, that at whatever percentage, they would want to have $10,000 plus their interest accrued submitted to them after 5 years. So it really just depends on the arrangement and the terms that you have. One thing that I would say is that if you do engage with an investor, which is like, think about if you have a mortgage on your home, make sure that there's not a prepayment penalty clause, because some investors are counting on that particular amount of money back after a specific amount of time, and they will engage in a pre-penalty payment. So if you want to get out of that loan a little bit faster, let's say your company does better than you thought it was going to do, and you want to, basically unhinge yourself from that particular debt burden, just make sure that you don't have any kind of penalty clause in there. If you do have one, and it's the kind of thing where you feel it's worthwhile to pay them off to get out from under the burden of the loan, that's perfectly acceptable. But just make sure that you really, really clearly understand those investors.
Okay, perfect. And I think, the investor stage is definitely coming, I would say, after you've already looked into if you can get a loan from a commercial bank.
Right.
Usually those are bigger numbers. So, if you're looking for, let's say, 5,000 and up, US dollars we're speaking here, but, translate that into your own currency, then, I think it's too early to look for an investor. You want to remain control of your business and of your finances.
Yeah, think of it also too is that most loans have to be collateralized. So if you don't have something to basically provide counterpoint for the actual loan, they're going to either look for a signature. If you have good credit, they might take a signature loan, which basically is a statement saying, with my signature, I will absolutely back this loan. Some people will say, okay, we'll give you X number of dollars for a lien against your property. So there's all kinds of things to consider with the type of loans that you get.
Yeah, definitely. Just for everyone who's watching, can you give us a definition of a collateralized loan? I think you just insinuated it a bit, but just for those who don't know exactly what that means. Sure.
It's a loan where you have some kind of collateral or some kind of what do I want to say, thing of value that you put up to ensure that the loan will be paid. So for instance, in a mortgage, the collateral of a mortgage is the home, which is why if you do not pay your mortgage, you go into a state of default in which the mortgage holder or the mortgager is able to use the terminology foreclose, which basically means that they take the property in order to satisfy, and they will sell that in order to satisfy the loan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So just for everyone's knowledge, that is the definition of a collateralized loan.
Right.
We'll also have a recap of this session later. So we will provide all the definitions and everything for you guys. Another question from Aisha, again from Uganda, which ties into a question we had on our pre-question set, is about separating your personal finances from your business finances.
Absolutely.
And I know this is really tough for a lot of young entrepreneurs, and it also ties into good bookkeeping.
Yep.
So if you can give us some tips or how you can know, let's say, when something is a personal finance or when it should be filed under a business expense, and tips you have for keeping those things very separate, because they should be very separate.
Right. You need to have a set of books that is absolutely 100% dedicated to the business. Okay. What you do in your personal space is your personal space. If you, let's say, for instance, are your only employee and you're going to pay yourself out of your earnings, okay, you're going to pay yourself out of your profit, excuse me. What happens here is that you actually should work with a professional to ensure that you are doing those things right. So in the U.S., we have, in many cases, local taxes, state taxes, federal taxes that have to be filed. So the best thing to do is to work with somebody to make sure that at the end of the year, you're not going to wind up paying this big nut all out at one time. Many of the industries or companies here have reserved the right to file quarterly, and that gives you the opportunity to pay those institutions as you make the money instead of waiting till the end. So I would say definitely if you commingle, which is the term for blending your funds, you're going to have some troubles, at least in US, knowing how much it is that you owe your taxes on. Also, too, it's a good idea to be able to know from the previous question asked about having the finances and the financial structure for scalability. If you don't know how much your business is actually making or costing you, then you won't know if you are in the position to scale. You also don't know if you're in the position to have to make adjustments along the way. So if you're taking out too much money, then or using the money incorrectly, you won't really know where your business stands. So there are all kinds of guidelines out there. So for instance, if you want to, market to somebody, you want to take them to lunch. There are actually in the US, like I said, the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, has guidelines for how much money can be spent for those types of interactions for building your business. You do want to make sure also too, from the other side, is that you have a good understanding of those expenses that you have so that you can get the proper deductions for your income. So, we pit, income against expenses, and then only work with taxation on profitability and those types of things. So it gets a little complex, and I'm really overgeneralizing here, but you need to make sure that you have accurate recordings of, what you spend. You would not believe how much money we spend on communication. So think about communication from phones, from internet connectivity, to the cost of paper, which some people use and don't use. Think about how much you might spend setting up a website and domain names and all of that kind of stuff. All of those things are expenses that in the framework that I work in, that can be used off as a write-off for an expense write-off in the U.S. Framework. So I would say absolutely keep them separate. You should. The only thing that should come out from you for your investment, from your company, is how you're paid. And I would strongly suggest the use of either a payroll company or some kind of a tool or an accounting professional to ensure that you are paying yourself correctly. So, just make sure that all of those are done, that's done correctly.
Perfect. And I think, everything you've kind of mentioned there shows how intertwined actually understanding your business and how it works and having good financial management are. Because as you mentioned just now, if you have a good understanding of all of your expenses, your cash flow, how much income you're paying out to yourself and your employees, you have a really good understanding of when it's time to scale up, when you're able to make those new investments. So it really gives you that, let's say, deep clarity on how your business actually works financially.
And you also want to make sure that you've done a proper amount of investment in your future. For instance, if you've left the company, if you're starting out fresh, then you might not have had what I'll call the safety net. The features that sometimes working for an employer will do for you, at least in the U.S., with regards to benefits. So if you don't have any kind of income continuity, if you don't have a disability plan or some kind of health insurance, those things are very important, at least in the framework that I am in. So making sure that you have accounted for that in your pricing model to give yourself some kind of security for how you as the entrepreneur and the investor in this initiative is rewarding you correctly. Just making enough to eat, just making enough to pay your bills is not a good business model. You have to be able to provide yourself with some kind of forward-thinking finances so that, when you're old and gray, if this business has been nice to you, you'll be able to either sell it, stop doing it, or whatever the case may be, give it to your children, or any kind of legacy that you have there, and still be able to be in a position that you have been taken care of financially. So it's very important to be forward thinking with that type of planning, and that's the type of thing that you can get out of proper fiscal responsibility with regards to your business.
Definitely. And I think, that's also really important in other aspects of your business, understanding your target market, where they're going to be a year from now, 3 years from now, how that's going to affect your revenues. So looking forward is, a crucial element of having a strong and stable business. So, really be constantly thinking about how your business is working now, but also how it will work a year from now, 3 years from now, even 5 years from now.
Many entrepreneurs, when they're first starting out, the first couple of years might not even take a salary. Like I said, they might have somebody else kind enough to feed them while they're going through this. Some people only take the base amount, and what they do is they plan themselves out as part of a budget in the term of forward-thinking budget. They'll say, okay, after 2 years, I'll begin to take my own salary. After 3 years, I'm going to start investing in some kind of investment vehicle for my future. After 5 years, I'm going to start to scale. So you have some kind of approach. It's always a good idea to have a plan, even if it doesn't come to fruition. At least you have it there if you need to move something up a little bit because you're doing better, or if you need to move it out a little bit because you still haven't made the profit levels that you want to address that particular plan item. It's still a good idea to have them there so that in the back of your mind that you need to plan for the next thing.
Perfect. Yep. I think that's a great insight. So we have another question from Desmond from Cameroon. And he asked, what financial tools do you think young entrepreneurs can adopt and apply in their business that might be more specific to developing countries? So maybe this can expand on, some of those, online tools that we talked about, as well as leveraging your network. So I think we've addressed this a bit, but can you try and go into a bit more detail?
Old model. There used to be. I don't even know right now because I said I worked on my own and then I came back to being an employee. So we used to use Quicken Books. Quicken has a set of software. There used to be Peachtree. I'm not sure what else is actually available in the space, but I would say that that you could find tools that are appropriate for your industry. I think that I'm not sure what the finance model is for taxation with regards to other countries. So I would say definitely. When we had our own business, we combined a couple of different tools. We used our own accounting software that we created. I shouldn't say software, spreadsheets that we created. We did our books with TurboTax Business, and then we did use a financial professional to help us with filings, just to make sure that we were doing that correctly. So that was the person who, at the end of the year, we were able to create our own income statements for the company. We were able to produce what we call in the U.S. a 1099, which is a statement of earnings and income for an individual in lieu of a W-2. So those things are, things that we had done by a professional, so that it kept us out of any trouble that we might get into. And we used them, basically, we met with them twice a year with the accounting professional to just make sure that they had anything that they needed. And then at the end of the year, we gave them our information from our books. They created all of the respective filings that we needed out of them. And then we pushed any of the monies that were due out to the various governing bodies that had their hands in my pocket.
So I think something to get out of this session in general is that it might be worth paying a bit to work with a professional who can support you in really getting your financial management set up at the beginning and your budget set up, so you can have this strong understanding. There's also, mentors, plenty of networks out there that can support you for free if you have access to the right networks. Yay Community provides some of these experts, but it's really worth it to work with someone who knows what they're doing so that you can avoid trouble later on.
One thing to know, in US, the IRS does not accept, "Oh, I didn't know that," as a legitimate excuse for why you didn't pay anything. So they will. Yeah, they're not real kind about that. This is not a learning experience. What they do is they will, if you don't know and you have not paid something, the fines will just start. So think about not knowing something for a couple of years, and then maybe you owe them $500, and then after 2 or 3 years of fines on top of that, you could wind up owing them a substantial amount of money. So yeah, at least in the U.S., in the IRS framework, not knowing is not a valid reason for not doing something. So this is where the importance, like Claire was saying, the importance of having insight from a professional can save the potential to save a lot of hardship. And one thing,
money down the line as well.
Yeah, right. And just make sure, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek, just make sure that if you do borrow money from an individual, that this is a person that is a stand-up individual. If don't involve yourself with somebody whose rates seem usurious. So that's a word you can throw out there. If the interest that they're charging seems preposterous, and some loans from banks are preposterous. Credit cards in the U.S., I don't know how they are in other countries, the loan rates on credit cards are very, very high. But if you're with an individual and they're giving you repayment terms that seem unrealistic, I would say to look elsewhere. You do not want to put yourself into a situation where you are borrowing money from someone who is not above board and may have I'll just put it out there, criminal element to them. So just be very, very cautious to the type of person that you engage with regards to personal loan from someone. Yeah,
it's not worth the risk
for the small. It's not worth the risk.
It's probably going to be a lot more hassle.
Yeah, if there's no paperwork involved, that falls under the "that's too good to be true" model, which means it is. So there should be paperwork. There should be some kind of a term set out. There should be some kind of even if you don't have, do it through, even if it's through a parent or whatever the case may be. Do yourself a favor, draw up a document Go to a notary or some kind of a professional that records this type of loan activity. This protects you, it protects them. If they balk on that and don't want to participate in that, then I would say look for somebody else to help you out. But make sure that this is done. A lot of families have had breakdown in their family relationships because of money. And money you can get more of, family maybe not so much. So yeah,
sure.
Just be careful with that.
Very good point. Very good point. So we just have time for, I think, maybe one or two more questions. So about your own personal experience, one of the community, a lot of people say that small businesses fail because of poor financial management. This in your
Claire,
own work. And what does finances work?
Could you repeat this?
Sorry, I can repeat it one more time.
Yep.
No problem. No problem. So the question was about your own experience. So that small businesses often poor financial management. Have you done your own work, and how do you kind of see it coming tail signs?
Yeah, well, I think I got it all, but Claire was breaking up a little bit. So I think it was regard to financial management and being a success factor in a business. Is that right? Did I get that right, Claire?
Yes.
Okay. And so I would say that.
Do you have any anecdotes?
Yeah. So I would say that from a financial management perspective. I think I would put that in like one of the top three. The first one I would say for success in a business is having a clearly defined product or service, which you understand what it is and how you're going to market it. The second is that do I have the finances to sustain this business, both personally and professionally? And the third would be is that do I have enough business savvy to understand how the business works? So we're not talking about the first and the third. We'll just center on the financial perspective of it. I would say that people grossly underestimate how much money that they need to start a business and how much time it takes to actually get business to come in the door that shows profit. You might be able to cover your loans, your expenses, and things like that, but profit is what's after all of those things are taken out. So I think that having enough money to be able to do that is a lot more than most people think of. Keeping in mind that, okay, let me think about how I want to word this. From a financial perspective. Like I said, I think it's one of the leading items that cause for failure. And the one thing I wanted to say was very important is that a lot of entrepreneurs put all of their eggs in one basket when they're in startup mode. So they'll have one client that pays them very, very well, and they have had this client for 5 years. And then what happens on year 6? That business goes out of business. They change their model. Somebody else in the services that you provide dangles a cheaper carrot, and they go for that person instead. So make sure that you have enough of a client base or enough of an industry base to be able to sustain your business model. I've seen that happen time and time again in it. Now, myself, I did 7 years as a consultancy. What happened is that my husband and I I alluded to this earlier, we worked as a partnership for the two of us for basically a project management, systems analysis, and programming small consultancy. We knew we wanted to keep it as a closely held company, so that wasn't a problem. Everybody that we had as an employee was basically in gig mentality. We got them the job, we paid them for the job, and when that job was over, we did not have the expenses of ongoing payroll when they were not working. What happened for us is that we got involved in the I'll show my age here, the Y2K internet bubble burst. In the early aughts, right, early 2000s, and that became very, very hard for us to sustain the type of work that we did. So we found that we were spending a lot of time marketing, which is not in our framework is not billable. So we were spending a lot of time in marketing and not enough time earning income to support the business. At that particular time, I said, this is no longer working for me. If you want to keep doing it, that's okay. Because, if you have a good relationship with your spouse, you can say that kind of thing. I said, I'm going to go out and become an employee again. And that's what I did. So I think that you have to know, what's that old saying when you play cards? You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. So, I decided I was going to fold up. He stayed with it for a while. I fed him. I was nice about that. And then after a while, he said he felt that he didn't want to invest any more time and effort on the personal level to the business. So he said, I'm also going to break out from this and become an employee again. We both have dabbled a little bit with things that I would say were more fun than getting involved in the type of work that we did at the time. Frankly, the type of work that we do is more conducive to being in a large organization like Citi. So the type of skill set that I have is more rewarded financially by working for an industry that needs the type of work that I do than a small business that would bring me in as a consultant.
Okay, excellent. So hopefully that provides everyone with a bit of insight on Michelle's experiences as a entrepreneur herself and her, let's say, don't want to call them failures, but your learnings from that process.
They say that the average small business folds within 5 years. So we made it to 7. So I consider that a great success. And while we did it, it was quite lucrative while we did it. And it only when it was no longer had that financial reward that we make it an absolute decision to transition out of it. It was good for what we wanted it for.
Exactly. So we have one final closing question from Aisha again, and it deals with the topic we spoke about in the beginning, but we can come back to it. And her question is, how much money should you have saved for a emergency fund? So how much should you be set for a rainy day, for when things go wrong, economy tanks? As you mentioned, the Y2K tech bubble, it popped. It was great, and then it popped. So what kind of money should an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur especially, have set aside for these kind of emergencies?
Okay, from two perspectives. From a business perspective, I'm not sure what the answer to that would be. I would say enough to cover your essential loans and expenses. So I would say that you should probably try to have, I would say, 3 to 6 months of that set aside so that you can have that protection, give yourself a little bit of a buffer to be able to make sure that you can continue with your industry. On a personal note, the guidelines in the US is 6 months. To have 6 months coverage of expenses. I know very few people who have that kind of money set aside, but I would say it's a little scarier to be a entrepreneur, that if you can at all have that type of cushion, that would be a good thing to have. And I would say that before you engage in a business model, to bring yourself down to bare bones and expenses as an entrepreneur for personal expenses. So first of all, eliminate any personal debt that you have so you're not carrying that. Make sure that you have, as much possible as you can handled. Maybe a little stockpile of cash and some other things. But, if you're really intent on investing in yourself, you might find that you got to scale back some things, some luxuries or whatever the case may be while you're going through this transition. But I would say a minimum of 3 to 6 months in the business space, maybe more if you have that, and then 6 months from a survival standpoint on the personal side. Great. And that's just my opinion. Some people will give you some other guidelines, but that's about what I would say. It really comes down to how comfortable you are with being in a tenuous situation and what your toleration for risk is. If you're risk averse, you might want to have more. If you're easy with risk, then you might have less. So yeah, it really just depends on that.
Perfect, perfect. Well, I think we're actually 3 minutes over. So everyone who asked your question, thank you so much. I think we had some great questions. Thank you, Michelle, so much for taking the time to speak with all of us at Yay Community. I think it's been a really, really helpful session. I know budgeting and finance can sometimes be scary, especially
it's just
when
numbers on a page. Just numbers on a page, yeah.
Exactly. But taking that leap can be difficult. And, some things that you've mentioned here today are to monitor all your expenses, even the just 20, euros, Ghanaian cedis,
right.
pounds, whatever it may be, keep track of all of it.
Absolutely.
And also, think about that. Finance is essential to your business. So if you understand what are all the incomings and outcomings financially of your business, you'll have a really strong understanding of when it's right to do something. So when it's right to scale up, when it's right to get a loan, when it's right to look for an investor. I think those are some great insights. For everyone here, I'm going to post your Yay community profile in the comments section, and anyone can reach out to you via the Yay community website. Or for everyone that's still viewing, we can also get you in touch with Michelle directly. If you'd like to post your name in the comments section, if you'd like to be connected with Michelle directly, we can go ahead and do that. You're available for also information on management and leadership. Michelle is a breadth of information, so we're happy to connect you guys. Thank you again, Michelle. I don't know if you have any parting words for everyone here.
No, good luck. Make sure that you are passionate about what you do with regards to business. Is something that is, going to take this much of your time and effort and energy, should have some value to you and to society. So I wish you all luck. And if you need any help along the way, just feel free to give me ping me. I'm on in LinkedIn as Michelle Beynon, and I'll be more than happy to share any words of wisdom that I have, or try to find you somebody who can give you a better answer than me if I don't know.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Everybody.
And thank everyone. An evening, day, wherever you are in the world.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.